Planning rosters for your employees can be a challenging and time-consuming task. You will have to deal with the changing availability of your employees. You'll need to cover all skills for your planned shifts, and you'll have to make sure that your planning is in line with strict government regulations. For example, employees can only work a set amount of Sundays, and there has to be a minimum amount of hours between their shifts. In real-life situations, the planning will also have to be tweaked continuously to deal with changes in demand and availability. These challenges are often seen at organizations with a large amount of employees that work in shifts. So, for example, healthcare organizations, factories, call centers, and cleaning services. The Smart Rostering app is particularly helpful for these use cases. It is based on our automated planning engine that combines artificial intelligence with Mendix. These technologies are utilized to fully automate the rostering process based on your own rules and preferences. Not only will it save you time, it will also make sure that your employees get the best possible planning for their indicated availability. Now let's get into the demo. After login, we are first presented with a page where we can select a tenant. This app supports a multi-tenant setup, which means that organizations that are split up into different business units can easily utilize it to create rosters for their individual units or locations. In this particular demo, we will be creating a planning for a hospital. Generating an optimal planning is dependent on a few different components. These components can be configured within the app. Let's get started with the skills. All your employees will have a specific skill set. That skill set will determine which employees are allowed to work on a particular shift or in a particular spot. Spots represent where the actual shift will take place. So a hospital, for example, will have different spots for every ward. In the example of a factory, you'll have different spots along the assembly line. Different spots can require different skills. Next, we can configure the employees. For each of your employees, you can configure their skills, their contract type, and their general weekly schedule. Now let's get into the details. We'll go through a basic automated planning process first. Your employees will want to indicate their availability before we generate the actual planning. They can indicate their availability on 3 different levels. They can indicate the days or parts of the day that they will not be available. If they indicate that they are not available, then the planning engine will exclude them from those shifts, like in case of a holiday or a dentist appointment. They can also indicate whether a particular time slot is undesirable for them. They might have a private appointment that they would really prefer to attend but is not essential, like their weekly soccer practice. In this particular instance, the activity is always at the same time on the same day of the week, so they can configure a recurring event for it. Lastly, they are able to configure the shifts that are desirable for them. All these events will be taken into consideration when generating the planning. Now that we know the availability of our employees, we can move on to the actual shifts that need to be accounted for. These shifts can be imported with a template. We select a rotation version, for example, a rotation for 1 week, insert the start date for this particular rotation. The template will obviously contain information about the date and time of the shifts, but can also contain some additional data like the preferred employee for that shift. After we import the template with our specific configurations, the app will generate unassigned shifts in the calendar view. So now that we have our shifts and we know the availability of our employees, we can go ahead and compute the planning. In the process of computing the planning, the engine will take into account all the shifts, all the employees, their different contracts, their skills, their availability, and preferences so that it can generate the optimal solution for the given resources. After the planning engine has completed the calculations, we can see the updated calendar view. All the gray shifts are planned as per the given terms and conditions and don't require any action. The green ones have been particularly successful because the engine was able to assign the employee that was indicated as the preferred resource in the imported template. So now that we've seen a basic rostering flow, we'll show you how the app deals with changes in planning, and we will go into the details of the different variables that can affect a roster. We will take Amy Watt as an example. She is planned to work on a Wednesday morning shift. When we go back into her availability, we can see the shifts that the planning engine assigned to her. Unfortunately, her availability has changed and she'll no longer be available to work the Wednesday shift. After changing the availability, the shift immediately turns red, prompting that further action is required. We can go ahead and also adjust her availability for the Saturday shift, but in this instance, we'll indicate that this time slot is undesirable. The shift changes color to orange, which indicates that the planning for the shift is not optimal, but also not blocking. In the general overview, we can see the same thing. The Wednesday shift has turned red. Additionally, the system has generated notifications to warn the planner about the conflict that has arisen by the change in Amy's availability. From the notification details, we can directly go to the planning so that we can solve the conflict. We can do two things here. We can ask the planning engine to recalculate, or we can manually reassign the shift. We're going to let the planning engine do the work for us though. As you can see, the conflicting shift has been resolved and has now been assigned to Beth Watt. The shift is still not gray or green, so let's go into the details of that shift. Here we can see the reason why the shift has turned orange. By assigning the shift to Beth, she will have to work overtime and this will result in extra pay. This, however, is still optimal to assigning someone that is unavailable. So the system has resolved the conflict, optimized the planning with the available resources, but it will still indicate that it is not necessarily ideal. Often processes will require manual intervention at some point. Assigning or reassigning shifts is made very easy in the Smart Rostering app. Similarly to what we've seen with changing availability, the engine will help you make the right decision when manually assigning a shift. Let's say we select Beth Green here. As you can see, the shift has turned red because Beth is already working a shift that day. After completing our planning process, we can go ahead and publish it. Since we've created a conflict in the planning, the system will show a warning. We are allowed to publish with conflicts, but in this instance, we are going to check the notifications first. The manual assignment that we did for Beth Green earlier has resulted in 3 blocking errors. Her shifts are overlapping, which we should resolve really, but there is also not enough time in between her shifts, and she has one 13-hour shift. So, both of those errors mean that the planning is not in line with government regulations. Since it is very important that Beth works on that particular shift, we can go ahead and ensure that she stays assigned to it by using the pin functionality. In the details of the shift, we can pin the assignment, which means that the engine will respect that particular employee assignment upon recalculating the planning. After recalculating the planning, we can see that the shift is still assigned to Beth, while the other shift has been reassigned to Gus. The planning now also has a lot more orange-colored assignments because it had to schedule around that pin shift. When you make manual adjustments to the roster, it will often be less optimal than when generated by the engine, but sometimes the situation just calls for it. So let's go ahead and publish this new planning. After publishing, the planning has been grayed out. It can still be edited. All employees will be notified about the new published planning. They will have access to it via an app where they can view their shifts and indicate their availability. Thus far, we've been working in the calendar view, but it is very easy to switch between different visualizations of your roster. With 2 clicks, we can switch from calendar view to grid view, and then also to planner view. The planner view will give you great insight into who is working when, and you can view this for all your spots at once in one clear overview. The functionality for assigning and reassigning shifts will be available across all 3 views. Additionally, the app also has reporting capabilities to further analyze or share your data. With just a few clicks, you can export your data to Excel. This brings us to the end of our Smart Rostering demo. Thank you for joining us and hope to see you again.